We're witnessing right now the first generation of mutated humans. Okay, we're in the timeline right now where we're seeing the first generation of mutated human DNA, where it's going to be leading to that timeline of humans devolving and mutating into becoming the Greys. Okay. A lot of us think Greys are aliens, but they're not really aliens. The Grey is an offshoot of what has happened in this collective right now as a result of this experimental gene therapy that's being imposed on the collective consciousness. And you're seeing right now the first generation of the mutation is happening amongst the human collective. Over time, as this mutation continues, the human body, the human DNA is going to continue to evolve. This is the reason why now the Greys look the way they.
Well, it was the summer of 2008. I had just returned home from the grocery store, and I was unlocking the door and I was about to go inside when I heard a child's voice from behind me. "How's the food coming?" it asked. It spooked me a little, but then I turned around and I saw a small child, probably 8 to 10, I would say. Immediately, I knew something wasn't right. Where did this kid come from? As you can see, I live in the middle of nowhere, and it's certainly a kid that I didn't know.
People don't like talking about this kind of thing because it's not normal, and I wouldn't either if I hadn't witnessed this with my sister. My sister was present with me so that there's no denying it. She refuses talking about it lately. Out of the two of us, she was affected the most. That I can honestly say.
Okay, so she refused to have any part of this interview, and you're representing her, right?
She's moved on from the incident, but refuses any involvement in the subject matter. You see, it took a long time for both of us to recover, and what you're going to learn from my story is that once you see them, they never go away.
So I was just unlocking the door and I was about to go in when I heard its voice, and it was standing right about there, and it freaked me out, and I just went to the house and I, as quickly as I could really, and locked the door. That's when I watched him from the yard. So why here? Why me? So I asked him if something was wrong, and he asked if he could use the phone. And again, I said, "Is something wrong?" He said, "I just need to use your phone, so please invite me in." So at that point, I started getting, shivers down my back. I knew something wasn't right. This kid, he was wearing a gray hoodie, tan shorts, and it was in the middle of summer. And what was also odd about him is that his hoodie was kind of covering about half of his face, and he looked down as he spoke to me. And it wasn't until he said, "Don't worry so much, I just need to use you." And then his face lifted up, flashed up, and I saw those eyes. Those eyes, it was black. They were black, all black, not a bit of white. I mean, truly terrifying stuff that I couldn't even make up. Like I said, he looked like a regular kid, the tan shorts, the hoodie, but it was just those black eyes. Ugh. It was probably about noon when I came back that day.
Can you tell me what happened after you realized his eyes were black?
I immediately knew something was very wrong. I went right in the house and I locked the door. I watched him from the window, and he kind of stood in the yard, and then he began walking around the house, and I kept an eye on him, but eventually I just lost him. In true fear, I ended up calling the police and reported that there was an odd child hanging around. They showed up, but they couldn't find a single trace.
Now, normally there are side effects that are associated with having an encounter with black-eyed children. Did you have any kind of side effects or anything abnormal occur after the event?
Well, I was scared shitless for a few weeks. I would say that's abnormal. I would lock the doors twice. I would double check before I went in or out of the house. Honestly, things are pretty much back to normal. But next time, I wouldn't hesitate to shoot this thing. Whatever it was pure evil, and I never want to see it again. I don't want it around here ever again.
It was during the summer, and we were on a long road trip back from Florida. We were visiting my Aunt Jerry, who lives in the Gainesville area of northern Florida. We were driving for about 2 hours and had just crossed over the Georgia border. We decided to look for a restroom. My sister had been driving, gone through a lot of coffee, and I was in the back reading a book on my tablet. We were on a long road trip, and we decided to look for a restroom. We stopped at this shabby-looking rest stop off the side of the highway. My sister got out of the SUV while I stayed in the back reading on my tablet. She was only gone for a few seconds, it seemed, before she suddenly emerged back into the car. It scared me that she came back in so fast. She was crying, so my adrenaline began to rush. My first thought was that somebody had attacked her, and I kept asking her, "What happened to you? Are you okay? Tell me." She just muttered something about there being a little girl in the bathroom. So then my next thought was that something had happened to this little girl and that she needed help, and that would explain why my sister was becoming so frantic. She locked the door, still crying, and said, "We have to go now." I kept trying to calm her down, to get her to explain exactly what had happened. I kept asking her, "What's wrong? Tell me, tell me." She couldn't answer. Eventually, she muttered about the little girl again and said, "We have to go now." I got out of the car to get into the driver's seat. I remember having my phone in my hand to call the police when I heard a voice come from the back of the SUV. It was a little girl saying, "Don't call for help. I just need a ride home. Please invite me for a ride." This voice made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I was startled and scared to death of this little child. I was frozen in fear. Suddenly, as I stood there motionless, she became closer to me and reached out and almost touched my hand.
Did she walk to you, or she just became closer?
I don't really remember her moving. It was like she teleported, but I can't really remember. I just know she became closer because suddenly she reached out and almost touched my hand.
Okay, so what happened next?
Well, my mind couldn't quite interpret what was happening. I suddenly became extremely sick in my stomach. It all happened in an instant. I wanted to throw up. My flight or fight urge kicked in, and I threw my hand away from her and jumped into the car. I locked the door, and I was about to take off when I looked in the side mirror, and it was gone. I wasn't about to wait around to look for it, so I took off and kept driving. I tried to talk to my sister, but she just lay there motionless in the passenger seat. I didn't know if I should call the police or not. I thought what I had seen was supernatural, or that I was going crazy. We were on the road for about 2 hours before we stopped at a busy gas station. I got out of the SUV and looked around just to be sure. I ended up throwing up in a trash can. It was so embarrassing, but I was so relieved. I'd carried that sickness with me the entire 2 hours. I tried to talk to my sister about what happened. He started going through the stages of depression and developed a sickness.
I'm sorry to hear that, but she is better now, right?
It must have taken the course of 2 years before she was back to herself and could move on from that night. I still have nightmares from time to time, but I don't think anything of it. We decided that the best way to beat this would be to not talk about it or feed it any negative energy. It worked for me, but like I said, it took a long time for my sister to rehabilitate herself back to normal.
No, I have to ask you, why did you not decide to call the police? Was there any doubt that maybe this was a little girl that needed help? That thought ever crossed your mind?
It did after we left the rest stop, but that experience of fear was so powerful that there was no denying what I saw. My sister was my absolute proof of that. We both felt something so sinister. I can't explain it. I was so afraid of feeling that fear again. It was like I was living a nightmare, the kind of stuff that horror movies are made out of.